Welcome, dear aspirants. Thank you for joining us for this special explainer brought to you by Rungta IAS Academy. I'm Faculty A, and today, well, we're going to dive really deep into a critical, contemporary issue that's been making waves in the financial space. Hello, everyone. I'm Faculty B. And yes, what we are looking at today connects directly, and I mean directly, to your General Studies Paper 3 syllabus. We'll be focusing specifically on the Indian economy, regulatory bodies, and those ever-growing challenges around cybersecurity and digital governance. So let's get straight into it, shall we? Okay, so the core conflict we are analyzing today stems from some very concerning recent news reports. They highlight how guidelines set by SEBI, that is, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, pronounced SEBI, are allegedly being completely bypassed.
Precisely. The main issue at hand here is the massive proliferation of fraudulent financial and investment ads on major meta platforms, Facebook and Instagram. Now, SEBI has very clear advisories stating that advertising of investment products must strictly be done by SEBI-registered firms. But as you'll see in just a moment, there is a massive gap between the regulation on paper and the reality on the ground.
And right here, this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of that gap. 97%. Dear aspirants, please keep this exact data point handy in your notes. You are absolutely going to need it for substantiating your mains answers when discussing digital regulation. Absolutely, you have to use data to back up your points. And this shocking figure comes from a joint study conducted by researchers from New York-based Bard College and the consumer watchdog group, ECHO, pronounced ECHO. They found that more than 97% of the financial ads they sampled were actually coming from completely unregistered entities. It's really quite alarming. The true severity of this issue becomes crystal clear when we actually decode the data. The researchers examined two specific batches comprising over 3,000 ads. These were associated with more than 1,300 pages across 2 days in 2025 and 2026. And the breakdown is just striking. A massive 97.4% of these ads were totally undeclared. Only a minuscule 2.5 to 2.7% were actually registered with SEBI. Think about what that means. This glaring discrepancy highlights a profound, persistent vulnerability for everyday retail investors who are just casually scrolling through their daily feeds. So, the crucial question we have to ask is, how on earth is this happening? Let's analytically compare the two frameworks at play here. On one hand, the SEBI guideline is absolute, right? Only registered firms can advertise, full stop. But on the other hand, we have the meta mechanism.
Right, and what exactly is that mechanism?
Believe it or not, it's simply a self-disclosure checkbox provided right at the time of ad creation. Researchers noted that these advertisers, many of whom were exhibiting telltale signs of fraud, simply avoided all verification steps by, just failing to check that box. They literally just didn't make the declaration and the ads went live anyway. And that brings us to a very aptly titled report mentioned in our source material called Money from Misery. Let me tell you, its findings are incredibly disturbing.
Yes, exactly. Researchers Hamza Faruqi and Inayat Sabiki found over 400 scam ads that were still actively running on meta platforms months and sometimes even years after they had already been reported in the media. So what does this show us? It shows that the danger to retail investors is not just some momentary glitch, it is a persistent, systemic issue.
Now, as serious UPSC aspirants, you must always examine both sides of the coin impartially. So how does the corporate entity respond to this? Well, a Meta spokesperson defended their position by stating that this checkbox was part of a voluntary commitment and that they do proactively partner with SEBI. Exactly. Meta claims that they combine this self-declaration feature with their automated systems to proactively identify and take down violating ads. Furthermore, they argue that they try to distinguish between strict securities and investment ads, which legally fall under SEBI, and the much broader universe of financial services advertising in India, which, might be governed by entirely different regulators. However, when we juxtapose Meta's claims with SEBI's actual regulatory actions, it reveals a very clear friction point. Take SEBI's February 2026 circular, for instance. It had an explicit aim to manage this exact space.
Right. The core objective of SEBI's social media norms was to clearly distinguish content posted by regulated persons and their agents from content posted by totally unregistered persons. But the ground reality of the execution, as that 97% failure rate clearly shows, indicates a massive regulatory gap that desperately needs bridging.
All right, let's shift gears and talk about how you can use this to maximize your marks. These concepts are pure gold for your GS3 mains preparation. When you're writing your answers on this, do not just tell a story. You need to use proper academic keywords to fetch those extra marks.
Absolutely. Note these down right now. First, regulatory arbitrage, which is where entities exploit the loopholes between different regulatory systems. Next, self-declaration failure, which just perfectly describes this whole checkbox fiasco. You also want to highlight investor protection as the core objective here, and then frame the broader debate around big tech accountability. Using these specific terms is really going to show the examiner your analytical depth.
Finally, I want you to consider this scenario. Imagine you are sitting right there in Dholpur House for your personality test, and the panel looks at you and asks, how should India regulate big tech in the financial space to protect investors without stifling digital growth? It's a brilliant question to ponder, isn't it? Because you have to balance that rapid digital innovation with strict regulatory compliance. We want you to critically analyze this topic further and construct your own well-balanced viewpoint. And with that thought, that wraps up our explainer for today. Keep revising, stay focused, and from all of us at Rungta IAS Academy, we wish you the absolute best for your preparation.